Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back. Happy New Year to Turn Bark Time. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we are going to be here a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, it is season 6, episode 4. But first, Bark, before we dive into our category, how were your holidays?
We kept things pretty low key. We stayed around town for the most part. Went down to Vancouver a couple of times. Went to the movies. Saw Moana 2.
Ooh, what'd you think? I haven't seen it yet.
The girls said it was better than Moana 1.
Wow.
It was good, but I don't think it was that good. And then for New Year's, we were going to do some stuff, and then stuff went kind of sideways. So we ended up buying Wicked and watching Wicked at our home theater.
I haven't done that yet either. Can I get a rating?
I was pleased. I haven't seen the musical on Broadway. Okay. I've read the book.
Yep.
But it's been a minute. So the film adaptation, part 1, seems pretty consistent to the book, and apparently it is. And then I've been told by a department mate that Act 2 differs from where it is in the book. So have to wait another year to figure out what happens with Elphaba and Galinda.
Now, we have to ask the ultimate question, Barker. Have you been practicing your high note?
Nope. No? I am not defying gravity them.
No?
Nope. No, sir.
All right. Oh, good.
I have a hard time enjoying the movie soundtrack because I'm so used to listening to the actual Broadway production.
Right. Yeah. I have some friends that have really enjoyed that and been super excited to see the movie. So I had a friend who lives in New York, and she's obviously seen the Broadway musical and things like that. But she got to see, I think she saw it like the day it came out, and I could tell she was so excited. So, and she said it was just awesome. So, which is great. Yeah, we went to Florida for the break. Had a good time. Got to eat some of my famous Hog Body wings. Shout out Hog Bodies. It's a little tiny wing place in Fort Myers, Florida. And then I jumped up to North Carolina, see my friend up there. And we did try to do everything. But the bummer, Bark, was we woke up the third day I was there, and we were going to drive 3.5 hours to Charleston. And so I bought our tickets to go see Fort Sumter, right? Like, because you're there, you got to see it. We are 20 miles from Charleston when we get the email that there is a tornado watch in effect, thus canceling my trip to Fort Sumter. Also, fun fact, the 54th Mass, from the movie Glory and everything like that, we were going to go see Fort Wagner. Fort Wagner doesn't exist anymore. Got washed away. So kind of same thing like Fort Sumter was built on like a sandbar. So supposedly it got taken away in a storm and stuff like that. Just completely gone. Poof. Then came back and just put our feet up. So it was nice.
That's why you don't build a castle in a swamp.
Seriously, right? What is Shrek doing? All right, folks. This story that we're going to tell, we're talking about today, actually comes from something I saw. Well, I think it was November when I saw it for the first time. So in November, they had a release. Netflix ran a commercials during football games advertising their new movie called 688. So 688, I watched it actually on the plane to North Carolina from Florida. Nice little 2-hour flight. Perfect. And was like, man, this is a good topic to talk about. I thought it was just an interesting story. My dad watched it too. My dad's a big history guy, and he watched it and he goes, I didn't know about it. He goes, I thought when he's like, I'm surprised nobody made a movie about it sooner. and nobody like had another thing. He goes, because we had a big push for those untold stories that have popped up over the years. And he goes, I just was surprised nobody had made one yet. I was like, oh, yeah. So let's dive on into it. 6888, Bark.
So 6888, I watched it yesterday. I didn't see the trailer on Netflix on the TV.
Oh, you had? Okay.
It is in regard to the 6888, right? So I don't know. What did we say? 6,888.
Huh?
Central Post Directory Battalion, which somebody pointed out the other day, there's probably not that many Central Postal Directory battalions in the military.
Yeah.
But it was an all-black, all-female Women's Army Corps unit. So a WWII, which living in the state of Washington, WWII means like Washington Code.
Yeah.
And then I think about the now defunct Western Athletic Conference as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was a WWII unit. Somewhere between there's some debate about roughly between 800 to 850 women, all black, all female, and so like their motto of the unit was no male, low morale. And so apparently it was advocated by First Lady
Eleanor Roosevelt
and Mary McLeod Bethune. So like from like Bethune Cookman College, right, or university, right? It's an HBCU.
Mm-hmm.
They said that they wanted like women of color to like give them important work. Like they were advocating like we need to. It's almost like the same storyline as like Glory or Red Tails, where segregation is in the military, and so like units of color where people want to serve aren't being allowed to serve in roles that are, I guess, equal to that of people, of white units. And so I found a website. It was, I think, the 6888.org. They said you can't say that it's the only black unit to go overseas. You can say it's the only all black, all female WWII unit to go overseas, to go over to Europe.
Clarifying that too. Now, I just saw it on National Park Service, and I've seen it on actually that 6888.org. It is not an all black unit. There was at least one Puerto Rican and one Mexican woman that were in the unit. So I know the National Park Service put it in there too, just to clarify that it is a multicultural unit. I guess the big push we're having here is it's a non-white unit that's doing this. So
unit of color.
Yes.
And I mean, that's been a question that I've often kind of like thought about, but have not delved into it because I don't think there's a lot of scholarship necessarily going, or easily accessible scholarship going on to find during discrimination or like during segregation and like the Jim Crow era, like how were like Hispanic populations targeted in like Texas, or were they targeted and things of that nature. But anyway, like their primary job was they get stationed in Birmingham, England to solve a mail backlog. Like a bunch of, the movie dramatizes it, but like the idea is that a bunch of like you have millions of American servicemen that are serving in Europe and the Pacific, and people are writing letters and the soldiers are writing letters, but like neither of them, the letters from Europe aren't coming to America and the letters and packages from America aren't reaching the soldiers, because when you think about the logistics of warfare, like are personal correspondence a priority? The answer is probably
no.
And so they get there, and I think they said they were given 6 months to clear the backlog in England.
Yep.
They did it in 3, and they estimate that it was 17 million items.
Yep.
Parcels and letters distributed. And like this was done, they were given a kind of a bombed out school, the King Edward's School, that didn't have very good heat. They had temporary buildings. when they went into school. And the thing to understand is like people were just like, well, just send them the military was like use their military ID numbers, right, on their locator card.
Yep.
And what they found was that some of the like master documents like weren't written very well because again, there's a massive influx of soldiers joining the armed forces. So like things are being done really quickly, written by hand. So it's like, did they transpose a number? Did they smudge a number?
Yep.
And then in the case of the mail's been sitting there for months, if not years.
Yep.
And exposed to, rats. And so at some point, like, like vermin are eating through the packaging. So
Right.
You are having to try and figure out where does this letter go, even though I don't have a full name or address or serial number.
Right. And so one of the big things, and again, the movie is kind of the inspiration here, but as we know, and we would tell both of our sets of students, is movies exist for the sole purpose of entertainment, right? We will fudge historical fact to make the movie more entertaining. An example of this would be like in the scene, and we won't give away too much of the movie. It is very I think it's very entertaining. Barker thought so, right? So, but they have this big scene where they march down the street in front of a general to prove that they can do it and everything like that. And I just don't know. I didn't find any evidence of that being a thing when they're getting. There is evidence of them dealing with a lot of sexism, racism. A lot of the women in the unit actually said that the European local people treated them better than their own Army officers or even better inside the United States. So they did have a couple of things that were kind of designed against them. There's a chaplain who tries to cause problems for the major. The major that is in charge is a real person. Her name is Major Charity Adams. She'll actually retire as a lieutenant colonel in the WWII. But he'll do things like ordering them around to like report to the office, and then they'll be AWOL, which is absent without leave. And so basically that, she's dealing with people that are trying to mess with her unit. Now, they are successful, like we said, in getting the mail shipped out. So successful, actually, that they get a chance to go to France. And they start trying to solve their mail problem as well. Looking at it, I think it's after the war, isn't it? Or it's after VE Day when they get to France.
I think so. Yeah, they go. I think it says they go to. I don't parlay
French.
Yeah. I think it's the city of Rouen and Rouen, yeah. And then after they end up in Paris. Mm-hmm. And I know that when they get to Paris, I think they end up doing some mail work, and then like some of them work as like nurses as well, because they're they're there for those kind of this is still in the era where women don't fulfill combat roles,
right?
And like they participate in a parade honoring Joan of Arc, and they actually like the picture captioning was like really like bland, and it was like they march and through where Joan of Arc was executed, and it's like, okay, like,
yeah,
why are we marching people through an area where we executed a woman who was sold out by her country so that they could I didn't understand that, but and it does talk about like by the time it's the same story of minorities wanting to participate in kind of the great effort against Hitler and against like this big it was the conflict of the way, and like how do you show that you want to be an American, like you fight in this war? And like we've already we talked about the Japanese American soldiers earlier on this channel back in season 1, and so like
I was gonna say that was way back.
that was but like so like looking at this idea that like people, and it's the reoccurring theme of like, why are we trying so hard to fight for a country that doesn't want to fight for us? And I mean, like that, unfortunately, that sentiment like is still valid as like we get into like the Vietnam conflict.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons that like there's a lot of discontent in Vietnam with the soldiers that are over there. They're like, we're over here fighting for a country that doesn't care that we're here, and that's why we're here, and not other people aren't here. Um, yeah, but like, you know, the idea that it is based on a true story. Like that was something else that people were actually like people they were Netflix, I think, actually had to go out and like have an ad campaign to actually tell people that it was a real event and it was not a fictional story. Like it's
Right.
actually historically based
Yeah.
and fairly historically
Heck.
accurate. Like in comparison to some other things, like you know, like we covered Cocaine Bear and how
Yeah. Good
you
Lord.
know after you're 30 seconds into the movie, like all the historically accurate things are done,
Yep. It's
and it
gone.
goes for another 2 hours. This one, I mean, it's just a matter of like creative license with you know and fleshing out some things and adding god what's the term for it like MacGuffins like to kind of
Yeah.
help move the story
Yeah.
forward um and to make things a little bit more deeper a little bit deeper as they go forward. And I think like there's you know there's some women that die and while they're overseas,
There's
but I
three
think
of them.
the situation of their death is different than it's portrayed in the film.
I believe so. I kind of looked and I did a little digging. I couldn't find um the actual like people like what had killed him. It says it's a Jeep accident, and in the movie it is not a Jeep accident that kills them. So um I'll do just quick fact check real quick if we can.
Yeah, I kept seeing that. I kept seeing it referred to as an accident
Yeah.
while they
So
were
I
on
don't.
duty, which
Yeah.
I don't think if it had been what it was in the film, how it was depicted in the film, it would not be
Yeah.
referred to that way. But I also think that they use that with creative license to make it seem more egregious
Right.
in the fact that the U.S. military did not say they
And
were going to pay for their burial,
yeah.
and so a collection was taken amongst the unit to bury those three soldiers. So I think that, to a certain degree, it changes the circumstance. Again, like I think this movie falls into the same category of film as like we've already talked about like Glory
Mhm.
and like Hidden Figures, where we're just trying to find these stories and tell you know what efforts these people went through to support an effort for a country to be successful that didn't necessarily care for their success.
Yeah.
um and there's some criticism of like, well, why do we pick this story like kind of out there on the internet because people love to be negative. And it's a matter of like, well, this is what they were allowed to do. Like
Yeah.
if you want to tell a factual story, like there's only so much that we can factually tell.
Absolutely.
um so I mean, I think unfortunately part of it's the political climate right now, and like their unit like comes back to the United States, and like there's a couple of different books that are written by some of the soldiers that served in the 6 AAA, and like they all talk about like coming home to like zero fanfare.
Yep.
They weren't necessarily really recognized. It takes until there was a monument erected in 2018 at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas recognizing the 6 AAA. But again, like that's 2018 when the unit was disbanded in 1945. They served in Europe for about a year of deployment and then came back to Fort Dix in New Jersey, and then were like
Disbanded.
disbanded, right?
Yep.
Because the war was over.
Yeah. And there wasn't a need for it anymore. So yeah, everything I'm finding just in the quick fact check it's a Jeep accident. The other thing that's very interesting about that is the movie portrays them dying in England, not in France.
Yeah.
And so that's another, just again, you don't have the time to talk about every single thing. The huge accomplishment was being given 6 months to do a task and completing it in half the time. And again, they had a good reason to do it, right? To keep the soldiers fighting. This is near the end of the war, right? You really need the final push. We're talking about the Battle of the Bulge and everything like that, where you have those last ditch efforts by the Germans and the Axis powers to, maintain their hold and their control. Um, and so it's very interesting, like to look at, just a unique story. Right. And one thing I'll give kind of a random shout out here is if you ever get the opportunity and you're down in New Orleans or New Orleans, as they like to say, that is home to the Higgins Boat Factory. And the Higgins Boat Factory were basically the landing crafts. So if you've ever seen any like recreations of D-Day or any of those, The Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, like any of those types of movies where they're landing, Higgins boats were built in New Orleans. It's also home to the National World War II Museum. And I went there, oh Lord, how long ago was that? I'm not going to remember, but it was awesome. Think two Costco-sized warehouses next to each other. One is the European theater, one is the Pacific, and there were I'm probably safe to say thousands of stories that just came out of nowhere, things I had never heard of, that I found fascinating, and I could have spent way more time there. I think we ended up spending like 4 hours there, and it just wasn't enough, and so there's, like Barker said, we picked this story, Netflix picks it because it's a story that pops up, and they find it interesting and they want to create it. And again, Tyler Perry is known for making, African American based content and everything like that. So it just made sense to do it. But I thought just a really interesting story. I liked the movie. I think they did a good job dramatizing it. Again, I knew that there were going to be things that are off. There's a line in there that was my favorite, which was the one where they walk into like they're in boot camp and they first report in, and she's like, if you do not know how to put in a tampon, we will show you. And I was like, dang, I was like, not messing around at all. So, but
it was a good story. I did some digging too, like, and Charity Adams, after she retires from the military, goes on and works at a number of colleges. I think she gets a degree from Ohio State in psychology.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and works at a number of different like universities, like I think some in Dayton, and then goes down to like she's at Tennessee A&I, and then goes to Georgia State for a while. So like took that military, like she was a teacher in the military. If you think about it, right? She was the drill instructor and like taught all these women all these skills and whatnot, and then just kind of like stayed as a leader in education, and just the avenue wasn't there in the military realm, but found ways to continue that career, in the education sector. And I thought that was neat.
Yeah. I was like taking the skills and everything that they had learned. The cool thing that I thought at the very end of the video, or the movie, was the naming. So again, in 2022, the United States Department of Defense basically took a look and said, okay, we have a bunch of bases and forts in our southern region that are named after Confederate soldiers. So people who, were traitors by definition of our country. And so Charity Adams actually gets a base named after her. They remove a tag from Fort Lee in Virginia and they redesignate it Fort Gregg Adams. Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg, and then Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. And I think is it Early? Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, I think that was her married name.
Married name, yeah. And so they make that change. So I believe she's the only. Is it the only female or the only African American female to have a base named after her? I think she's the only female. So I think.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't say you're wrong.
Yeah, I love that.
One of the other things I thought was really interesting too, and they allude to it in the film, is, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the name, but it was like the thing that the military didn't understand is that when people wrote letters to their sons in the military, like they would just get letters that would say like to Junior.
Yeah.
Or like there was, and I think that there was a guy, I can't remember what the name of it was. It was like Kevin Smith or something, and like there was like
yeah.
7,500 pieces of mail to
Something Smith. Yeah.
It was a number of different people, and so like it's really really important to them that they send it to the right people. And it's like a system works really well when the system is like legible.
Yeah.
But like they had to turn to a bunch of other like I kind of like that like ingenious way of like solving the puzzle of trying to figure out how stuff gets where it goes.
Oh yeah.
And I mean I think postal services are, especially in the modern age, are underappreciated. And so you think about what it's like in a time of duress where units are moving across theaters and you're trying to get stuff there by boat, by air, and then by jeep to the correct units at the correct, and like timeliness is something completely different and something that we're
not used to it.
We underappreciate greatly.
Oh yeah.
The last letters, I think we like Tara's brother Miles and his family, his kids sent Addie and Emma some letters, and like we sent them a box for Christmas, and it blows my mind that it took a week, 7 days to go from Longview, Washington to Tokyo, Japan, or Adachi. But just crazy how modern shipping works. And like when Tara and I moved back from Kuwait, like we shipped a box from Kuwait back to Portland, and just it didn't get lost.
Yeah, it can make it. It's crazy. It's fascinating, right? We live in a world where I can, when I have an idea, I don't have to write you a letter. You live on the other side of the mountains. I literally can text your phone and you'll get it instantaneously. Like it's crazy. But then you think about this where it's like you're just sitting there and you have no correspondence, right? And you can only think the worst as a parent back home, right? Like you could only think the worst has happened. And it's just it boggles my mind. So
having multiple sons, on deployment. Both my older brothers were in the military and like served, and it was at a time when electronic communication was less of a thing. And I think, my oldest Bob sent some letters, and every once in a while we get to like call. But then I think about like when I moved to Kuwait to teach, like wasn't that much further, but it was like another 5 years later, and like then video chatting was like in its infancy. So like they could see my face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like how much smaller has the world gotten? So I think part of the struggle with this is that people might not just appreciate like the difficulty of hand sorting that much mail, and like they legitimately were given airplane hangars like stacked to the rafters of just. And if you're not a military veteran's child and never seen like an army duffel bag full of stuff, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and the other crazy one that like got me is I think I read that they did they were in 3 8-hour shifts and they worked 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Like, good Lord. So, very cool story. 688. If you want to watch it on Netflix, it's on Netflix. It's like I said, entertaining story. Some of the ins and outs of the little, caveats that are meant to entertain rather than be historically accurate, but just a cool story. And do your own digging, right? Like we've laid this out for you. If you want to find more and send us a message or anything like that, let us know. We're always down for different history pieces. So, but Mark, anything else?
Just a quick shout out to our man Jimmy Carter, who passed away over the break. 39th president, was a centurion. So if you don't know what that means, it means he lived to be 100. He was 100 and a couple months old. Before he passed, he'd been in hospice for I feel like a year and a half.
I think they said 2.
2?
Yeah. And still went to friggin' like work and did stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know. If you haven't been around me, you know that people who've been around know that I really appreciate Jimmy Carter and the work that he did in and out of office, and the person that he was, and the fact that he wasn't willing to compromise the person that he was to, like just because of the job that he held at the time.
Yeah.
So
National Day of Mourning tomorrow. So when you guys watch this, let's take a moment really quick for Jimmy. Awesome. All right. Well, guys, until next time, on the turn.
I'm the Bark.
We're going to be here a long time. Have a good night, everybody.
Be safe.
And be well.